Kamala Harris standing behind a pulpit on a Sunday morning in a church. If you don't believe that this happened, you'll want to stay tuned because this week we're going to talk about that. Well, good evening and welcome to another week of Explain, another week where we engage the culture from a biblical perspective in a manner which glorifies God. I am your host, Troy. I am so thankful that you decided to take some time out of your Thursday night to join us. We've been talking about a lot of very heavy and important things. Not that what we're going to talk about this week is not heavy or important, but we're going to have some fun this week. It has been a very long time since we have done a reaction video on this channel. I think it's been since we were doing, it was like me and Colby on the same show. But anyway, this week we are back with a reaction video. It would appear that this past week, Kamala Harris went to a church and she got behind a pulpit. And, the rest is history. Okay, let's talk about this. And without any further ado, I'm going to play the clip. Here we go.
So Scripture teaches us, let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up.
Okay, so just for context, what she's quoting from is the book of Galatians. She's quoting from Galatians chapter 6, verse 9, which in fact says, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap, if we do not give up." Okay, I'll stop there for a second, but verse 10 is very, very interesting to me, okay? And we'll get into that in a second. But first of all, you've got this verse, let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. And and there are so many things that come into my head, and that came into my head the first time that I saw this clip. But before I even get into any of those, let's just acknowledge the obvious. This is Kamala Harris preaching. Okay, I'm not gonna. Let's not try to call it something that it's not. She's behind a pulpit on a Sunday morning, teaching from the scriptures. Okay, she's preaching. Okay, she's doing what looks like preaching, and the immediate question would be, who allowed this? What church would allow that? And there are so many reasons why I have to ask that question. Okay, because for so long we've been told about this idea, first of all, of separation of church and state. And at any time that a pastor gets up in the pulpit and starts saying anything, even if it has to do with the text that he's talking about and preaching from, says anything that's remotely politically conservative, people start coming after him and saying, no, you can't talk about politics in the pulpit. You can't say these conservative things. The pulpit is not for someone to talk about politics. Yet here we are. Okay, here we are, 3 weeks from the election, and Kamala Harris herself is in a pulpit teaching from the Bible. Tell me how that is not a violation of the idea of separation of church and state. Can someone please explain that to me? Because I have been thinking about this for days, and I cannot figure out why that is not a violation of the separation of church and state. That people keep barking at conservative Christians about every time they get up in the pulpit and share something that's even mildly politically conservative. Okay, they start getting slammed for talking about politics in the pulpit, and they get slammed for what's called political idolatry. But it never goes the other way. Like I don't know how I haven't seen anybody yet say anything about this clip being political idolatry. Couldn't she be tempting people to commit political idolatry? I mean, these are the things that we have to think about. Okay, so let that be said. There's another thing though that that we can't bypass here right at the beginning. It's this idea of Harris being in a pulpit. Who allowed that? And I go back to that. Like, who allowed that to happen? Whoever allowed that to happen is not taking care of their flock. They're not watching over their flock. They're not doing what they're supposed to do as a pastor. They're not. They've neglected their duties, because a real pastor would never allow Kamala Harris to stand in their pulpit and preach to their people. Wouldn't happen. Wouldn't happen. Okay, now let's get into the verse that she brought up. Again, let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up. Okay, and I just have to say, she's preaching from the same Bible that defines what doing good and doing evil is. Okay? And so how can you read from a Bible that says, do not grow weary of doing good, while you are literally advocating for the slaughter of babies in the womb? That's just one example. Okay, the Bible clearly says that is not good. That's not good. Okay? And there are plenty of other examples. Like, the list could go on and on and on. And one thing that stuck out to me, if you look at verse 10 here, right? If you just read one more verse, it says, "So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith." Now, different people have different ideas of what that last part means, especially to those who are of the household of faith. But I can tell you what doing good to the household of faith is definitely not. Doing good to the household of faith is definitely not saying things that would indicate to people that if you get elected into office, you are going to fundamentally change the First Amendment of the Constitution, which gives people the liberty to freely worship. Okay, I can tell you that doing good to the household of faith is not telling them that they can't worship God. Okay, that's definitely not doing good to the household of faith. And doing good to the household of faith is not saying that you are going to censor free speech. Okay, that's not doing good to the household of faith. Doing good to the household of faith is not saying that you want to make modifications to the First Amendment, which is what people who are running with her have said. That's not doing good to the household of faith. Okay, let's continue. There's more here. There is more. We're only 16 seconds into a 1 minute and 22 second clip.
So I first encountered the words of Galatians as a young girl at 23rd Avenue Church of God in Oakland, California, which is where I sang in the children's choir, and first learned the teachings of the Bible. My earliest memories of those teachings are...
Okay. Now she's doing this thing that she always does, where she tells this story about growing up. Okay? And look, I don't doubt that it's true. I mean, some people will probably, I've seen people be like cynical about like, is it even, are the stories that she tells from her childhood even true? I don't know. Unless someone proves that they're not true, I'm just going to take it as being true right now. I mean, that's not even the point of why we're here. But I just want to point out to you that, again, she's going on about this, like telling a story, okay, that has nothing to do with the verse that she just quoted. Okay, what does the fact that she went to a church when she was growing up have to do with doing good and not growing weary? Okay, and I'm not even really here to talk about her exegesis of the text or anything. Like, we're not doing any hard exegetical sledding today. Like, this is not why we're here. But I just have to say, man, like, she's doing the same thing in the pulpit that she does, whenever else she stands up in front of people. It's this story that she's telling. It's a narrative. And that's one thing that I think Republicans are getting better at it. But I think for a long time, Republicans they haven't been great at the narrative, telling the story. One person that strikes me as really good at telling a story is J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance is an incredibly skilled politician. And he does. He always tells his story of growing up. And I think that's good. And it's because I think he can connect with people in that way. And similarly, I think what Harris is trying to do here is connect with people. I mean, she's not connecting with me because all that I can think about is the fact that she just quoted a verse. And what is she going to do with it? Okay. That's where my mind goes, but maybe with this audience, it connects. Again, this is why you shouldn't have someone like this in the pulpit. You shouldn't, okay? Man, we got people riding, I don't know, dirt bikes or weed whacking or something out there, man. Wow. Well, I'm sorry about that. There seems to be some action outside tonight on the street, but hey, we will carry on.
About a loving God. A God who asks us to speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves.
Okay. It just keeps getting worse. It keeps getting worse, okay? A loving God. Very good. Yes, God is a very loving God. He's more loving than you could ever imagine him to be. And that's precisely the reason why we are taught in the Bible that all lives, all of the lives of people are important and they're worth something. And that's why you can't murder babies in the womb. Okay, I mean, this should be common sense. And then she says, speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves. And how can that, the first thing that comes into my mind when I hear those words is the unborn. The unborn obviously cannot speak for themselves. Okay, so man, and then this reminds me of I think it was in that debate, the vice presidential debate with J.D. Vance and Tim Walz, where Walz actually quoted the Bible in that debate, and he said something to the effect of taking care of the least of these. And man, I just don't understand how people can't see that. Or maybe at least how they can't see that, right? I'm sure a lot of you out there can see that. You can see that obvious connection. Man, the least of these, the people that can't speak for themselves, the unborn, right? The unborn. And on top of that, I mean, even, she's going to go on to talk about poor people and needy people and stuff. Man, I mean, you think about there are lots of poor people that are American citizens. Lots of poor people that are American citizens. And they're currently being overlooked for, in order to give aid to people who are in the country illegally and who are criminals. They have a criminal record abroad. Okay. Okay. Let's keep going.
To defend the rights of the poor and the needy.
There it is.
And so at an early age, I learned that faith is a verb. It is something we show in action and in service. And
okay, again, really, this shows why this is a good example of why I believe that the church in America, the church that actually is standing on the Bible in America, okay, and the Democrat Party are at an impasse. Because of this, because when the Democrat Party thinks about serving people and being kind to people and being loving to people and doing good to people, they're not talking about all people. They're just not. They're just not. And a Christian who knows their Bible will understand that God condemns partiality in the strongest terms. We have to come to grips with that. We have to come to grips with the fact that the Democrat Party, when they think about showing kindness and being nice to people, they're only talking about being nice to certain groups of people. Okay, and too often it's groups of people that are living destructive lives that destroy themselves and those around them as well. And so look, I'm not saying the Republican Party is perfect. I mean, I have very, very often in the past on this very podcast voiced my deep frustration with the Republican Party. And I mean, I've even told you, like, you know, I'm very disappointed with the Republican Party's abandonment, really, of the importance of the lives of the unborn. But there's one convention that has an abortion truck outside of their annual, or I guess every 4 years meeting. There's one party that has an abortion truck outside their convention, and one party doesn't. Still makes the choice pretty easy for me. Okay, let's keep going.
We show it by heeding the words of my pastor, who Bishop spoke with yesterday, Reverend Dr. Amos C. Brown, who often invokes the words that we all know. One must...
Okay, someone needs to talk to that pastor. That pastor should be confronting Kamala Harris in her sin and telling her to stop acting the way that she's acting, and he should be exercising care over her soul. And that's not happening. It's just not happening.
Do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly with our God.
Do justice, love mercy, walk humbly with God. Okay. Do justice. We think about justice. Now, justice is a term that has been co-opted. Okay, we've talked about this in past episodes. Justice does not mean to many people what it used to mean, or even definitionally what it means. Okay, many people think of justice and they think of a certain group of people that need to have reparations, or that need to have, that need to have, as James White puts it, right, Uber rights. And so that's what's often being talked about when we see those words, when we see that word justice. So often, justice means a certain group of people get more rights than everybody else. And that is definitionally not fair. And it's not just, it's profoundly unjust. All right, and then this idea of walking humbly with God. Walking humbly with God. Man, we have a whole month of every year dedicated to what? Pride. Pride. That is the opposite of walking humbly with God. And we wave this rainbow in his face that this was the sign of the covenant that God was not going to flood the earth again. And it's like we wave that rainbow in his face, daring him to do it again. But because God is good and kind and merciful, he won't do that again. But man, if you think he's not going to carry out some other kind of judgment, you'd be sorely mistaken. You'd be sorely mistaken. Okay, and the other thing, this is not really something I want to get into very much because we've already gotten into it several times on many other shows. But Kamala Harris is a woman, and the Bible specifically says that women can't preach. I'm not even going to take time to defend that because we have talked about that so many times before. And if you're new with us, you can go check out our other episodes. But if you've been with us for a while, and you know what support we have for that. So yeah, and I wanted to look at this other post that I noticed. Let me see if I can pull this up here. Okay, Bishop Rosie O'Donnell, founder and senior impastor. Protestia does this thing where they have a joke where if there's someone who's in the position of pastor, like the title, and is not acting like a pastor, then they call them an impastor, right? of Koinonia Christian Center Church in Greenville, North Carolina. Oh, okay. This is the person this is the pastor that I was talking about. Okay, so that clears it up because as many people have said before, look, if you've got a woman as your pastor, you're not a church and you don't have a pastor because women are not pastors. So this is more fruit that this person is not doing their job. Because that's not her job. It's not her job to be a pastor. It's not a woman's job to be a pastor. So like I had said before, who let Kamala Harris preach here? They're not doing their job. Well, this is the person. Well, they're not supposed to be doing this job. So that clears up a lot. So she says, has Kamala Harris, who she describes as a phenomenal servant of God, speak at her church this past Sunday. Look, I'm not a huge fan of Donald Trump, but like I said, my decision will be very, very, very easy in a couple of weeks because there is one party that has an abortion truck outside their convention and one that doesn't, and there are other things as well. Okay. So don't take this as like I'm the biggest MAGA guy that there is. Hear that. However, when you have people like this running for office and they so fundamentally twist terms, this makes the choice very easy. And if we could just go back to that verse, Micah 6:8. We need to get back to what really is doing justice, loving mercy, and walking humbly with God. How do we do that? Well, we do what's actually just. We do what's just as the Bible defines it. We love mercy. What kind of mercy do we love? Well, we love the mercy of God. And we share with other people the mercy of God. We hold out his offer of salvation through the gospel that Christ died for our sins and was buried and was raised on the third day. We hold that offer out. That's the mercy we love. We love mercy as God has defined it. And we walk humbly with God. We understand who we are. We understand that we're broken, messed up. We're broken, messed up sinners. We are in rebellion to God every breath that we draw before we come to Christ. And so let that humble us. Let that humble us even now, knowing that I am no better than the person who now does not know the Lord and is living in a rebellious lifestyle. Let that humble us. Let that remind us that none of us are any more deserving of the grace of God than any other person. I am no more deserving of the grace of God than Kamala Harris would be if she came to Christ tonight. And I was no more deserving before I was saved of the grace of God, and I am no more deserving of the grace of God than Kamala Harris is now. Okay? So let's remember that, and that's the way to do it. That is the way to really follow that verse that people always rip out of context in order to support so-called social justice movements. Now, the right way to do it is to seek biblical justice. Okay, to actually speak up for those who can't actually speak for themselves, like the unborn. All right. To love the mercy of God, to love mercy as God has defined it, and to walk humbly with God, to understand who we are and who He is, and how undeserving we are of His mercy and His kindness and His grace. All right. So there you go. That's the show for today. We got to do more of these reaction videos. I forgot how much I enjoy doing that. Now that we've done one, we can't just do one, right? We got to do more. Well, I hope that this video was encouraging to you. I hope it shows you that the terms that people oftentimes people on the left, not always, but oftentimes people on the left will try to shove down your throat and make you do what they want you to do, like have separation of church and state, okay? Or just any time that someone says anything remotely politically conservative from the pulpit. Or stop preaching about politics. Your job is to teach the Bible. When literally the Bible is preaching moral applications that bleed over into politics. Okay? Or when people say things like, you just have political idolatry. Okay? When you know in your heart, you've checked your heart, you know that you don't have political idolatry. You know that you just believe that the Bible applies to all of life. And this is one of the places it applies. Just notice that. Remember that often happens. Okay? So, anyway. All right. I hope that you guys have a great week. And I will see you next time. Until then, God bless.